All right, welcome back to painting class. Yesterday we talked about this concept of showing distance in a painting by painting the landscape. We talked about the way that color shifts from light through some middles into some more brilliant or bright colors. We also talked about how you can make season change happen just by shifting the color that you have or that you use in your landscape. So you can see that this obviously feels more like summer. This feels sort of like either winter with snow, or like right now, the kind of weather we're experiencing in Minnesota where there isn't any snow right now, but nothing has leaves on it, right? So we talked about, and you guys practiced working with this concept of the color shift necessary to make a landscape. We talked about trees at a distance just being kind of lumps. And then we did use our paintbrush handle while our paint was wet here to just sort of drag through the paint to make trees that were very, very far away. Today, our entire focus is going to be trees. So even if you have some space down here at the end of your sketchbook, I want you to go ahead and turn your page so that you have a brand new full spread. We're going to talk about two different types of trees. We're going to talk about the kind of tree that has branches and leaves, and we're going to talk about the kind of tree that has pine needles, right? So this is stapled over on the bulletin board, and it's reminder steps that trees don't get painted in one layer. They kind of get painted in 3 or 4 steps, and you go back and add additional colors or layers as you need to for details. We are going to start, I'm going to show you how to paint a tree with branches and leaves. I'm going to show you how to paint a pine tree. We're going to talk about a tree that's really up close and talk about practicing making your paintbrush make small lines. You are then going to take the rest of class today to fill your sketchbook page so that you have lots of practice in tree making, because trees a little tricky to paint, and we're going to be painting them small, and so the more you practice the better it gets. So here's what we're going to do with our fresh sketchbook. We are going to be making small landscapes. So our sketchbook is 7.5 inches square, and we're going to be making a 5 by 7 landscape as our final project. So this is going to be about the size of our final paper. So we're going to be practicing making trees that are pretty little, like probably no taller than just like 3 or 4 fingers. So you should be able to make like a whole row of trees across, and then we'll talk about how to make a bigger tree that like feels like it's up close. And then tomorrow when you come to class, we'll talk about how to go back to the landscapes you made and add trees into them, because watercolor landscapes happen from the back to the front, and we very often let it dry and come back. Okay, so we are going to start with the kind of tree that has leaves, because you have to let those dry before you add on some finishing details. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a highlight color, because if we think about this, trees are, we want to avoid this like kind of simple tree, like from elementary school, right? Where it looks like just a simple shape or a lollipop. And instead I want to think about having my trees feel a little bit more naturalistic, and trees are collections of leaves and branches. So if we think about them, and I draw one quick with pen, it feels a little bit more like this, that a tree would have multiple branches and different chunks of branches and leaves, and maybe you can see some branches through. A tree also is a 3-dimensional object. So if I imagine that I am sunlight coming on the tree, that would mean this half or top section will be brighter or more yellow, and down here this half will be shadowed. So I can put a shadow under my tree, because my tree, if it's out in the sun or out in the sky, is going to leave a shadow underneath it. But that also means that some of these leafy chunks are going to have shadows. So when I go to start painting a tree, I will find that I need 3 colors, okay? I'm going to need a highlight color, a mid-tone, and the highlight usually is gonna equal yellow. The mid-tone is gonna be the green, unless you're painting a tree in a different season. And then you're gonna need a shadow or a dark. And this is gonna be either a deep green or kind of a bluish green. So I like to have all 3 colors ready to go before I start painting. So out here on my palette, I'm going to mix a little pile of some yellow. And then I do have a green kind of place over here already. So I'm just gonna add some green. I'm gonna just focus on summer right now. You can experiment as you practice with if you change your colors to like golden and brown, red, yellow, right? It would look like fall. So I'm gonna I mixed some blue and green together to make this, and now I can add a little bit of my warm red to it to make a really dark, kind of shadowy color. So as I'm mixing up my color piles, I'm hoping for them to be nice and creamy. So you can kind of see now I have a light color, I have a medium color, and I have a dark color. What I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna start with my light color. And it ended up kind of more green than I was hoping, but that is fine. And I'm kind of imagining this like blotches, right? And so we want to skip, I call them sky holes. Like I don't want my tree to be solid because a tree is a collection of all kinds of little things. So I'm going to paint that highlight color again. I'm going to clean out my paintbrush and I'm going to put some of this middle tone on here. Yeah, let this dry a little bit first, but I kind of like that wet into wet. Like the colors kind of blur into each other, which is a nice effect. That's why we spent a couple days working with wet into wet techniques. That kind of wet into wet painting philosophy helps us out a lot. And so you can see I had the highlight color, now I added in some of the middle tone, and now I can add in a few of the darks. And so I'm just kind of imagining this same like sort of shadow structure where I have the darks and the middles and the lights. And I need to see all the different colors. So you can see I have the light, the middle, and the dark. If I find that things get a little too intense or a little too bleary, our favorite, right, paper towel lift off. So I could come and I can lift some highlights out, and you can see that makes nice kind of tree texture. I have to wait now until that dries before I can add a stem or a trunk. So we're gonna let those leaf chunks dry and we're gonna talk about pine trees. So the same as before, a lot of times we think about pine trees as being this sort of a thing, or maybe this kind of a thing, stack of triangles. Which is a good like general shape of what a pine tree looks like. But we want to go with a little bit more realistic. And so if I think about more realistic, again, we're gonna think about the light coming at it. We need some sky holes. Trees are not solid objects. They have a little bit more irregularity. And I have discovered that these are a little bit easier to paint if I have them go directly to the ground. So you can see just like before, we have a little bit more irregular shape. I can paint a pine tree basically with the same color that I've mixed up for the other tree. I just am making it a little murkier, a little darker. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start, I can start with a full vertical line if I like. I want the top to be skinnier, and I'm just gonna start to branch out from that vertical line, making a little bit like a shaggy zigzag. And I'm just gonna do that all the way down until I'm happy with how tall that tree is. I have some options here now for making it look a little three-dimensional. I can take the handle of my paintbrush and I can put just a hint of some trunk in there. I don't want to put a trunk at the bottom. I can use a little paper towel, again, to lift off some highlight texture, which kind of lifts some of those lighter areas out. But that tree would be pretty much done. Like, if I decide to, I can add a little bit of a darker tone to some sections. So I can add something that's a little bluer. But I don't necessarily have to. I can also start them with a little bit yellower. So I'm gonna go ahead and just do this tree again. Sometimes I don't put that middle line in there. Just gonna kind of like zigzag my way down my page with this kind of little bit lighter paint, more yellow. Now I'm gonna come back and do some of that wet into wet color mixing on kind of the darker side of the tree. So I'm just bumping in a little bit of this darker color. It's gonna give me kind of a highlight color on the one side. I can put a couple of little spots of a trunk. I don't want to put the trunk all the way down because some of those branches and pine needles are going to be in front of that trunk. And again, if I like, I can do some paper towel lift off. Okay. So I'm going to keep practicing those trees. I can make a whole row of little pine trees all the way across my sketchbook. The tree up top is dry enough now that we can talk about adding in the trunk. And there are a couple of different ways you can do this. First of all, you'll need a gray. So the warm red mixed with the blue that's next to the green, the warm blue. I can shift this back and forth so I can make this be a little bit, so you can see it's really dark brown. And I do have to practice a little bit. If I take my paintbrush and I push down really hard, you can see that I'm gonna make a big chunky line. I need to work on practicing skinny lines. So this can be something that you work on. So what I'm doing is I'm barely pushing down on my brush and making it be as light as I can possibly pressure-wise. So once I've kind of got the hang of that, I can come back here to this tree and I'm just gonna put the tiniest little tree trunk on. This is like the tiniest little tree. It doesn't need a lot of a trunk. I can put in some hint of trunk, just a little bit darker paint up into the top. My trunk can be nice and straight, or my trunk can be a little more crookedy. It can overlap the leaves. So you can see I've overlapped the leaves. And I can make it a little more crooked. So it doesn't matter. I don't love the way that looks. So I just cleaned my paintbrush out and squeezed it dry. And I'm gonna go ahead and just use the paintbrush handle, see if I can get this to work, to kind of stretch that. Don't love that either. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna soften that back with a clean, dry paintbrush so that the top of that branch kind of disappears. And I can kind of soften the rest of that trunk a little bit too. This part kind of takes some practice. So I want you to go ahead and keep painting trees for the rest of class, because the more you paint, the easier they get. Go ahead and experiment with some different colors, making them overlap, but you're gonna fill this whole paper with trees.